What happens when a daughter demands her mother's most cherished treasures? One decision sparked a chain of events that changed the meaning of family, and left everyone questioning what truly lasts. Martha Jenkins never wore much jewelry these days. Her collection, an assortment of gold rings, delicate brooches, pearl earrings, and 2 heirloom necklaces, mostly sat untouched in the velvet-lined boxes atop her dresser. Each piece was a relic of a different chapter in her life: the gold locket from her mother on her wedding day, the sapphire ring purchased on a rare vacation with her late husband, the cameo brooch her own grandmother had worn every Sunday. Martha dusted the boxes every week, occasionally taking a ring out to turn over in her hands, remembering. Her daughter, Elaine, was not sentimental about such things. She was practical, ambitious, and, lately, impatient. For years, Elaine had hinted at her interest in the jewelry, but after the pandemic and a recent divorce, her requests became more pointed. She called Martha on a drizzly Wednesday morning, her voice businesslike. "Mom, let's not pretend," Elaine said, skipping the usual small talk. "You don't wear your jewelry. Why don't you just give it to me now? I could use something nice for once." Martha was taken aback by the bluntness. "It's not that simple, Elaine. These pieces mean a lot to me. They're memories." Elaine sighed, as if this was a well-worn argument. "They're just things, Mom. What good are they sitting in a box? I went through enough with Tom. I deserve something for myself." She pressed on, her voice growing sharper. "Why are you holding onto them? You can't take them with you." Martha's chest tightened. She tried to reason, suggesting that perhaps, in time, they could talk about which pieces Elaine might like. But Elaine grew frustrated, her tone tipping from impatient to accusatory. "You always did this, Mom, keeping things from me. If you really cared, you'd help me out. But you never think about anyone but yourself." The call ended with Elaine hanging up abruptly. Martha sat in the quiet, staring at her hands, hurt rising in her throat. She'd never thought of herself as selfish. If anything, she'd given until it hurt. Raising Elaine alone after her husband's death had meant sacrifices. Missed promotions, nights spent sewing costumes and checking homework, selling her own mother's wedding china when times were lean. She tried to go about her day, but the argument gnawed at her. She baked banana bread, watered her violets, tried to read a book, but Elaine's words rang in her ears. That night, Martha lay awake, turning memories over like the cool stones of her jewelry. Elaine as a little girl playing dress-up, the birthday parties, the late-night talks about heartbreak and dreams. Was it possible her daughter truly believed she was being selfish? 2 days later, Elaine showed up at Martha's door without warning. She let herself in with the old spare key, stormed into the kitchen, and demanded to see the jewelry. "I want to pick what's mine before you change your mind," she insisted, her face flushed and her eyes hard. Martha stood her ground. "Elaine, you can't just take things that matter to me. Not like this." The fight that followed was the worst they'd ever had. Elaine accused Martha of playing favorites, of hoarding valuables while her only child struggled. She brought up old wounds, missed recitals, forgotten promises, twisting them to fit her anger. Martha, overwhelmed and deeply hurt, could only repeat that her jewelry was not up for grabs. Elaine left in a fury, slamming the door behind her. Martha's hands shook as she put the jewelry boxes away, feeling an ache that was bigger than any one argument. That night, as rain battered the windows, Martha sat at her kitchen table and made a decision. She would no longer allow her life to be measured by who could claim the most from her. She would choose for herself how her memories were honored, and who was worthy of the gifts she had to give. She didn't sleep much, but by morning, she felt a clarity she hadn't known in years. Something in her heart had shifted. She was no longer afraid to act, not out of anger, but out of the deep, steady need to do what was right. Martha woke to gray light and the muffled sound of rain tapping the window. Her kitchen smelled of stale coffee and last night's heartache. She poured herself a cup anyway, hands steady as she watched the clouds drift past. Elaine's words still burned in her mind, but Martha felt something different now, a quiet resolve, sharper than grief, colder than anger. She made a list of things to do. First, she called her friend Nora, a retired teacher who volunteered at the local women's shelter. Martha asked about donations, particularly of jewelry. Nora's voice warmed instantly. "The women here come with nothing. When they're ready to interview for jobs, sometimes all they need is a piece of dignity, a necklace, a nice watch. It means the world to them. The words struck Martha deeply. Would they really want what I have? She asked. Martha, they would treasure it, Nora replied. That morning, Martha took out her jewelry boxes and laid each piece on a white linen napkin. She polished the gold locket, remembering her mother's careful hands. She cleaned the sapphire ring, recalling the laughter on the long-ago vacation. Each brooch, each earring, unlocked memories of love and hardship, but also of survival and self-worth. For the first time, she saw her collection not as things, but as stories, each waiting for a new chapter. She packed half the jewelry into a small velvet pouch, saving only a few pieces with the deepest meaning. As she did, she whispered a quiet goodbye to each one, blessing them to bring strength to their next owner. The act was not easy, but it was liberating. She realized, with surprise, that she didn't feel diminished. She felt lighter, as if a weight had lifted from her shoulders. The next afternoon, she drove to the shelter. The director, Mrs. Guzman, met her at the door. She explained Martha's gift to the staff and, within minutes, a small group of women gathered in the common room. Martha laid the pouch on the table and, with shaking hands, told them a little of her story, how each piece had marked a moment of hope, a time when she'd found strength to go on. "You are starting over," she said softly. "I hope these remind you that you are worthy of good things." The gratitude in the women's faces was overwhelming. Some clutched their chosen piece with tears in their eyes. Others simply smiled, silent but shining. One woman, barely 20, hugged Martha and whispered, "Thank you for believing in us." Martha's own eyes filled as she realized she had given something far more important than gold or jewels. She had given hope and recognition and the simple dignity of beauty. Later, as she walked back to her car, Martha felt the ache of loss, but also a rush of purpose she hadn't felt in years. She drove home slowly, letting herself remember the good her mother's locket had done in her own life, and imagining the courage it might give to someone new. That evening, Martha made herself a special dinner, a small roast and the last of her garden green beans. She ate by candlelight, allowing herself to savor the meal and the moment. For the first time in ages, she felt proud of herself, not for what she owned, but for what she'd chosen to give. The phone rang as she finished cleaning up. Elaine's number flashed on the screen, but Martha hesitated before answering. She picked up at the last ring, her voice calm. "Did you think about what I said?" Elaine demanded, her tone already brittle. "I did," Martha answered quietly. "And I made my decision." There was a long silence on the line. Martha didn't rush to fill it. She was done chasing approval, done explaining herself. She knew she had done something good. She slept soundly that night, the velvet boxes now mostly empty but her heart unexpectedly full. The next morning, Martha awoke to the sound of her phone vibrating insistently on the bedside table. It was Elaine, again. With a sigh, Martha let the call go to voicemail, needing a few minutes to gather herself before facing her daughter's inevitable anger. She dressed in her favorite blue sweater, the one her late husband always admired, and tried to focus on her own morning routine. Finally, she sat at the kitchen table and pressed play. Elaine's message was long, a torrent of disbelief and outrage. "You did what? You gave away the jewelry? I can't believe you'd do something so spiteful. That was supposed to be mine, Mom, after everything I've gone through." Elaine's voice wavered between fury and hurt, her words cutting deeply. "You always think of strangers before your own family. What about me? What about everything you owe me?" Martha deleted the message, her hands steady. She felt the old familiar guilt surface, but she breathed through it, letting the shame roll away like a tide. She spent the morning walking through her garden, snipping a few late autumn roses for the kitchen. She called Nora to tell her how much the shelter visit had meant. "You did the right thing, Martha," Nora reassured her. "Those women will never forget your kindness." Later that day, Elaine arrived unannounced, her car squealing into the driveway. She stormed up the steps and pounded on the door until Martha opened it. Elaine's face was flushed, her hair wild. "How could you?" she demanded, barely inside the foyer. Martha stood her ground. "I made a choice, Elaine. It was my jewelry, my memories. I wanted them to mean something, to someone who needed hope." Elaine's anger broke, replaced by tears. "You never think of me. You never give me what I ask for." Do you even love me? Martha's heart twisted. She reached for her daughter's hand, but Elaine pulled away, sobbing. You don't understand what it's like to lose everything. That jewelry was all I had left to look forward to. Martha sat with her in the living room, letting the silence stretch between them. For the first time, she didn't try to fix everything, didn't try to fill the gap with reassurances or promises. Instead, she listened, really listened, as Elaine spoke about her divorce, her loneliness, the years of resentment she'd carried since her father died. I thought if you gave me the jewelry, it would be like you finally chose me over your own sadness, Elaine whispered. Martha's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry you felt unseen, Elaine. I wish I could erase the pain. But things can't heal what's broken inside. Only love can do that. Elaine wept openly, the anger slowly ebbing. Martha offered her a cup of tea, and together they sat in the dim kitchen, both grieving what had been lost, and what could still be rebuilt. After Elaine left, quieter and less angry, Martha felt a strange mix of sorrow and relief. She knew she had not mended everything, but she had refused to be manipulated by guilt. She had chosen her own integrity, and, in a new way, her daughter's honesty, too. That evening, Nora stopped by with a basket of fresh bread from the shelter's kitchen. I heard what happened, she said softly. You're not alone, Martha. You gave hope, not just to strangers, but to yourself. Martha set the bread on the table, sliced 2 thick pieces, and poured glasses of wine. For the first time in many months, she felt steady, heart bruised, perhaps, but no longer afraid to stand for what she believed in. As dusk gathered outside, Martha sat by the window and wrote in her journal. Love is not measured in gold, but in what we're willing to give away, even when it costs us comfort or the approval of those we love most. The roses on the table glowed softly in the lamplight. Martha was alone, but she did not feel lonely. She had set something new in motion, a story not about loss, but about the courage to give freely and to heal. The following week was a flurry of consequences. Elaine's outburst left a quiet tension between mother and daughter. Phone calls stopped, and text messages remained unanswered. Martha felt the ache of distance but did not chase after Elaine. Instead, she focused on her own days, honoring her pain but refusing to let it swallow her. Martha dove into community work. At the women's shelter, she was greeted with open arms. Mrs. Guzman asked her to share her story with the residents, and Martha agreed, nervous but determined. She stood before a circle of women and spoke not only of jewelry, but of holding on and letting go, of surviving heartbreak, of choosing kindness, even in moments of anger or disappointment. The women listened intently, nodding, some even wiping away tears. Afterward, several approached her with hugs and stories of their own. Martha left the shelter feeling more connected than she had in years. Inspired, she began volunteering twice a week. She helped with resume workshops, led small sewing circles, and brought her famous banana bread for the Friday breakfast. The shelter became a second home, a place where her time and effort were valued. She found herself looking forward to each visit, to the laughter and the small victories of the women finding jobs, apartments, and new confidence. Back home, the house was quieter, but not empty. Nora visited often, bringing stories from the shelter and sharing updates about their little group. Together they brainstormed ways to raise funds, organizing a holiday bazaar, collecting warm coats, even auctioning off one of Martha's homemade quilts. The sense of purpose and camaraderie grew, filling the empty corners of Martha's days. Then, one evening, a letter arrived in Martha's mailbox. Elaine's handwriting was instantly recognizable, slanted, purposeful, a bit rushed. Martha's hands trembled as she opened it. The letter was honest, even raw. Elaine confessed to feeling abandoned since her father's death, to resenting her mother for being strong when she herself felt so weak. She admitted that the jewelry had become a symbol, a way to claim some kind of certainty, some piece of family history she could hold in her hand. I still wish you'd chosen me, Mom, Elaine wrote. But maybe you're right. Maybe I have to find my own way to feel enough. Martha sat with the letter for a long time, tears running down her cheeks. She wrote back the next morning, telling Elaine how proud she was of her for being honest. She wrote about the shelter, about the women whose lives had changed, and about the memories she still cherished, memories that belonged to both of them, no matter where the jewelry ended up. Their correspondence continued, slow, sometimes stilted, but real. There were no instant fixes, but Martha saw glimmers of understanding begin to grow. She realized that giving away the jewelry had not closed the door on her daughter, but had opened a new kind of conversation, one that might, in time, lead to healing. At the shelter, one of the women wore Martha's mother's locket. She told Martha it helped her feel brave at job interviews, like she carried someone's faith in her wherever she went. Martha hugged her tightly, gratitude and grief mixing in her heart. That night, as Martha lit a candle in the quiet kitchen, she felt a fragile peace. She missed Elaine, but she knew she had chosen wisely, for herself and for others. She wrote in her journal, "The things we let go become gifts in the hands of others." And sometimes, letting go is how we finally make room for the love we truly need. Martha smiled at the flame, letting its warmth carry her gently into the night. The weeks that followed saw Martha's life settle into a rhythm both new and reassuring. Mornings began with tea on the porch, wrapped in a sweater against the brisk air, watching golden leaves scatter across her garden. The ache for Elaine remained, but the pain was no longer sharp. It was something Martha learned to carry alongside the sense of purpose her volunteering brought. At the shelter, she became Miss Martha to the women and children. She listened to their stories, shared recipes, and offered gentle encouragement. When a young woman named Jess landed her first steady job, she wore Martha's sapphire ring on her finger. Jess hugged Martha, tears in her eyes. "I wore it to my interview, and it made me feel like I belonged somewhere," she whispered. Martha was asked to lead a workshop on writing cover letters and speaking with confidence. She hesitated. Public speaking had never been her forte, but Nora nudged her forward. The first session was nerve-wracking. Martha's voice trembled as she shared her own story, but the women responded with warmth, asking questions and sharing their fears. By the end, there was laughter in the room and several newly polished resumes in hand. Back at home, Martha finally tackled long-neglected projects. She cleared the attic, sorting through boxes of old letters, photographs, and childhood mementos. She found a birthday card from Elaine, age 9, crayon hearts and a declaration that, "You're the best mom in the world." Martha pressed it to her chest, tears prickling at her eyes, then tucked it into her desk drawer for safekeeping. Elaine's letters became more frequent. Sometimes she shared news of her job search, sometimes just her frustrations with daily life. Martha responded with encouragement, avoiding old patterns of advice or judgment. She found herself learning to listen in a new way, not to fix, but to witness. Their written conversations, though cautious, began to soften the edges between them. One Sunday, Martha attended a local concert with Nora and a group from the shelter. They picnicked in the park, music drifting on the breeze, laughter rising with every passing hour. As twilight settled, Martha felt a new kind of happiness, lighter, less tethered to old expectations. That evening, as Martha read Elaine's latest letter, news of a promising job interview and a heartfelt thank you for always answering, even when I was angry, she realized the healing was mutual, slow but sure. She wrote in her journal, "Some gifts are too heavy for one person to hold. When we share them, they become lighter, and so do we." Martha set the journal aside and watched the moon rise, silver and serene. Her home, once filled with the heavy silence of loss, now glowed with warmth from within, a testament to her courage to give, to let go, and to hope. By late November, the town readied itself for winter. Shop windows glittered with early holiday lights, and Martha's neighborhood bustled with people preparing for the first snow. At the shelter, talk turned to holiday meals and gifts for the children. Martha suggested a craft day, where everyone could make ornaments from scraps of ribbon, buttons, and felt. The project became a hit, laughter echoing through the hall as even the shyest women joined in. One afternoon, Nora found Martha in the kitchen, baking cookies for the shelter's annual party. "I got a call from a reporter at the local paper," Nora announced, grinning. "They want to do a piece about our little community and all the good you've done." Martha blushed, shaking her head. "It's not just me, it's everyone." Still, she agreed to be interviewed. The reporter listened intently as Martha shared the story of her jewelry and the choice to give it away. The article, when published, spoke not just of generosity, but of courage, the courage to let go of the past and invest in hope for others. The story caught the attention of old friends and neighbors, who stopped Martha at the grocery store to offer praise and thanks. One even offered to donate clothes and books to the shelter. The ripples of Martha's choice continued to spread. Elaine read the article online. Her next letter was different, gentler, more curious. I never realized how many people you help, Mom. I always saw you as my mother, not as someone strong enough to change lives. I'm sorry for only seeing what I wanted to see. She didn't ask for jewelry, or money, or even forgiveness. She only wrote, I'd like to visit if you'll have me. Martha replied simply, You're always welcome. The day of Elaine's visit, Martha baked a fresh loaf of bread and set the table with her best china. Nothing fancy, just a gesture of home. When Elaine arrived, she looked tired but relieved to be there. They walked in the garden, sharing memories, speaking honestly for the first time in years about loneliness, disappointment, and small joys. Elaine confessed, I was so angry at the world, I took it out on you. Seeing what you did, it made me wonder if I could be that brave too. Martha took her daughter's hand. Bravery isn't about giving things away. Sometimes it's just staying open to love, even after being hurt. They shared a meal in peace. Elaine helped clean up, then lingered over tea, admiring Martha's quilt in progress and asking about the women from the shelter. For the first time in a long while, mother and daughter spoke as equals. Two women with pain, yes, but also with hope. That night, Martha felt a sense of healing that was different from forgiveness. It was the beginning of a true understanding. She wrote in her journal, The bridges we build with others may take years, but every step toward each other is a victory. Outside, the first snow began to fall, dusting the world in quiet possibility. The days leading to Christmas were cold but bright. Martha filled her calendar with community events, decorating the shelter with strings of paper snowflakes, caroling with Nora's church group, and preparing baskets of food and small gifts for families in need. The shelter bustled with anticipation, the women buoyed by the promise of a holiday spent together, safe and seen. Elaine visited more often, sometimes just for tea, other times to join in the shelter's activities. She helped wrap donated toys, baked gingerbread cookies with Martha and Nora, and one snowy Saturday, brought a box of her own old coats and scarves to share. Elaine's initial awkwardness faded with each visit, replaced by genuine laughter and easy conversation. The women at the shelter welcomed her warmly, grateful for her kindness and for the mother and daughter story that inspired them. The local paper printed a follow-up article about the shelter's growing impact. The piece included a photo of Martha, Elaine, and several shelter residents gathered around a decorated tree, all beaming. The image made its way onto the shelter's holiday card, sent to donors and supporters across town. Martha's home was filled with new traditions. On Christmas Eve, she hosted a small dinner for Nora, Elaine, and a few shelter residents who had nowhere else to go. The meal was simple, roast chicken, potatoes, and apple pie, but the warmth in the room felt richer than any feast. After dinner, they exchanged handmade ornaments and read aloud from a collection of winter poems. Elaine, to everyone's delight, recited a favorite from her childhood, her voice steady and clear. Later, as the guests left and the house grew quiet, Martha and Elaine sat by the window, watching snow fall in the yellow glow of the porch light. Elaine broke the silence. I thought I'd lost you, Mom. But being here, I see how much I almost missed. I'm proud of you. Martha reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand, tears shining in her eyes. I'm proud of us both. That night, before bed, Martha wrote in her journal, The gifts that matter most aren't jewels or treasures, they're the moments when we show up for each other, fully present and willing to begin again. The next morning, sunlight danced across the snowy garden, and Martha awoke with gratitude, for second chances, for community, and for the gift of healing, one day at a time. New Year's came quietly, a soft snowfall dusting Martha's porch and frosting the bare rose bushes. In the gentle hush of winter, her life felt changed, not in a grand, dramatic way, but in the steady warmth of new understanding. She rose early, making coffee for herself and Elaine, who had stayed overnight after the holiday. They ate breakfast together, a simple meal of oatmeal and fresh fruit, sunlight streaming through the kitchen window. There was comfort in the silence between them, the old tension replaced by something honest and tender. Elaine handed Martha a small, neatly wrapped box. It's not much, she said, almost shy. Inside, Martha found a charm bracelet, handmade with little glass beads. A note tucked beneath read, For all the stories you've given me, and all the hope you've shared with others. Thank you for teaching me how to give. Tears welled in Martha's eyes. She fastened the bracelet on her wrist, holding her daughter's hand for a long moment. "You're my greatest gift," she said softly. The weeks that followed were busy with small acts of kindness. Martha and Elaine started volunteering together at the shelter, sometimes just folding laundry, other times listening to women share their dreams for the future. Martha continued her workshops and even began teaching a monthly memory circle, where women could tell their own stories and pass down what mattered most. Word spread in the community about Martha's quiet generosity. Local businesses donated supplies, church groups joined the effort, and a local jeweler offered to teach classes on simple jewelry making, using beads, wire, and even scraps of old silver. The shelter sparkled with new creativity and hope. At home, Martha found her life fuller than ever. She hosted Sunday dinners for friends and shelter volunteers, Elaine a steady presence at her side. Sometimes, after a long day, mother and daughter would sit together in the living room, paging through old family albums, sharing memories, and laughing at stories they'd almost forgotten. Elaine still struggled with setbacks, difficult days and doubts about her future, but she no longer faced them alone. The two women had found, in the ashes of old arguments, a relationship built not on things, but on the mutual willingness to give, forgive, and grow. One evening, after a community fundraiser, Elaine slipped her arm around Martha's shoulders. "You know, Mom, maybe it wasn't about the jewelry at all. Maybe I just wanted to know I was still part of your story." Martha smiled, her eyes bright. "You always will be. And now, so will all the women we've met. That's our real legacy." Later that night, Martha wrote in her journal, "Love multiplies when we let it go. It comes back to us, not as jewels or keepsakes, but as hearts mended, hope restored, and stories shared." With that, she closed her journal, drew the blanket over her knees, and watched the snow fall gently, secure in the knowledge that her greatest treasures were never really in a box, but all around her, alive and shining.